Hello, my name is Hernandez, and I'll be going over intracellular thresholds in relation to power output. As mentioned in the previous chapter, the body goes through noticeable changes during stages of growth and maturation, such as body size, body composition, and body changes. However, not only does change happen visibly, but it also happens at a microscopic level. Growth and maturation also happens within muscles, and it affects performance. Exercise metabolism. Studies of anaerobic and aerobic metabolisms during exercise have contributed to the understanding of pediatric exercise metabolism. This is explored in Chapter 2 by trainability aspects of exercise metabolism and the intramuscular energy sources during activity. During exercise, muscle contractions are acquired by the release of adenosine triphosphate, ATP. To be able to continue exercising, ATP has to resynthesize before total depletion. This occurs instantly by the breakdown of intramuscular phosphokeratin. Inorganic phosphate is involved in oxidation phosphorylation. During muscle contractions, as one molecule of ATP is used, it is then hydrolyzed to adenosine diphosphate and an inorganic phosphate. The regeneration of ATP during muscle activity is essential due to the supply and demand. As mentioned previously, one of the ways that ATP supply is resynthesized is through the molecule phosphokeratin, in this process, phosphokeratin transfers a high energy phosphate with ADP to resynthesize ATP. And the end product, of course, is ATP and creatine. Magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Magnetic resonance is a non-invasive technique that can monitor intracellular biochemical changes. It has the potential to change the understanding of exercise metabolism in youth. Phosphorus MRS facilitates the real-time monitoring of ATP, inorganic phosphate, and phosphokeratin. However, studies are currently restricted by exercising in a small bore tube. Athletic and non-athletic youth find it challenging to exercise within that tube. This was then addressed with the construction of a 2-scale replica scanner. Intracellular threshold in relationship to power output. This table was obtained from a progressive exercise test. Intracellular inorganic phosphate and phosphocreatine and pH in relation to power output determine the quadriceps of a 9-year-old during exercise in a magnet. This is a threshold for pH, and this is a threshold for inorganic phosphate and phosphocreatine. Nonlinear changes are seen in the ratio PI to PCR against power output, and pH plotted against power output. As the power output increases, the initial shallow slopes are followed by steeper ones, and the transition point is known as the intracellular threshold. As the power output increases, the pH decreases. However, the PI to PCR increased. The subject was resynthesizing ATP at a certain rate to be able to meet her power output. She required a greater breakdown of PCR for a given increase in power output above the intracellular threshold of inorganic phosphate and phosphocreatine. Her pH changes may indicate greater anaerobic glycolytic contribution as her power output increased. Intracellular thresholds have been proven to have good retest reliability even with prepubertal children. It is similar to whole body metabolic thresholds and can be used as an estimate of oxidative capacity of the exercising muscles and therefore mitochondrial function. PMR studies. One of the most comprehensive studies done to date of progressive incremental exercise monitored 33 9 to 12-year-olds, 18 which were girls, and 16 young adults, 8 which were women, reported no age to sex difference in the PI to PCR ratio at a below at or below the threshold. However, above the threshold, age and sex-related differences were noticed. For an increase in power output above the intracellular threshold in, phosphate and phosphokeratin, young adults required a greater breakdown of phosphokeratin than the children. The threshold in pH, the changes in the threshold pH were less significant in boys than in men and girls, indicating that they required a lower anaerobic glycolytic contribution. This is another study, and this is the first and so far the only PMR study to investigate biological maturity on exercise metabolism with young athletes. It was between 9 10-year-old prepubertal and 9 15-year-old prepubertal trained female swimmers. Intracellular pH was lowered and the PI to PCR ratio higher in the adolescent girls. The difference was not significant, concluding that the glycolytin metabolism in physical active children is not maturity dependent. However, this should be interpreted with caution because PI to PCR ratio difference was high between the two groups and might be a indicating that it might be a biological difference. In a more comprehensive study between 15 boys and 18 girls ages 9 to 12 years and 8 men and 8 women aged between 22 and 26 were monitored. No age-sex related differences were noticed between children and adults below the intracellular thresholds. However, changes were comparable between men, boys, girls, and women, boys, girls, and men and women above the intracellular threshold. It was apparent that the age and sex-related differences affected phosphate and pH response. An increase in power output during exercise above the threshold of phosphate and phosphokeratin adults required a greater breakdown in phosphokeratin than the children. It was also the case when girls were compared to boys. Above the intracellular threshold, pH changes were minimal in boys compared to everyone else, which indicated lower anaerobic glycolytin flux during high intensity. Compared to the study mentioned previously, the anaerobic energy contribution above the intracellular threshold of phosphate and phosphokeratin, inorganic phosphate and phosphokeratin can be attributable to more advanced biological maturity. In conclusion, threshold relation to power output can be used as an appropriate estimate of the oxidative capacity of the exercising muscles and mitochondrial function. Inorganic phosphate and phosphokeratin numbers may indicate the rate and amount in which phosphokeratin is broken down due to power output. On the other hand, pH can indicate the amount of anaerobic glycolytin contribution and power output. PMRS has a potential to help further understand development of muscle metabolism during physical activity, but the interpretation of data is currently clouded by the rigorous studies.